I've never been the type to scare easily, especially not on the road. Life as a truck driver is solitary, full of nights spent in empty places, so you learn to deal with silence and darkness. That night, I was coming back from a long haul, and it was past 11 when I decided to pull into a rest stop that barely looked used. It was the typical middle-of-nowhere spot, a small dirt lot, a flickering yellow streetlight, and a rusty sign indicating it was a rest stop. I parked the truck, turned off the engine, and glanced around. That's when I noticed a car parked off to the side, its engine running but headlights off. It seemed odd, but not enough to alarm me. I figured it was just someone resting or waiting for someone. I tried not to think much of it. The night was cold, and the exhaustion was starting to weigh on me. After checking the doors to make sure they were locked, I settled into the seat to get some rest before hitting the road again. That's when I heard the first noise. It was a faint creak, like something moving around the truck. For a moment, I thought it might be the wind or an animal. I'd had stray dogs wander around rest stops before. But then came another sound, much clearer this time. Someone rattling the door handle on my side. My heart jumped, and I froze for a few seconds, holding my breath. That was the last thing I expected at that hour, and it definitely wasn't the wind. I sat there, unsure of what to do, debating whether to peek through the curtain or stay completely still. The door handle jiggled again, harder this time. I grabbed my flashlight from the dashboard but hesitated to turn it on. Whoever was outside clearly knew I was there, but I didn't want to make it obvious I was aware. My mind started racing with possibilities. A thief? Someone looking for help? Or something worse? After what felt like forever, the sound stopped. I didn't hear footsteps or anyone walking away. Just silence, like the night itself was holding its breath with me. I took a deep breath and carefully pulled back a corner of the curtain. My eyes went straight to the car. It was still there, engine running, headlights off. But now, there was a figure standing beside it. I couldn't make out many details, but it was tall and thin, standing completely still. The dim light from the flickering street lamp barely illuminated the area, but it was enough to tell the person was facing my truck, almost like they were staring at me. A chill ran down my spine. I tried convincing myself it was just a fellow traveler, but something about their posture, their absolute stillness, felt off. It was like their presence carried something wrong. My hands trembled as I held the curtain, keeping an eye on the figure without moving too much. I couldn't look away. Suddenly, they moved. Not like someone walking, but in a quick, strange way, almost like they slid toward the car. Before I could process what I'd just seen, the car door opened, but no one got inside. The figure stood there, leaning partially into the car, as if speaking to someone or looking for something. I sat frozen, unable to move, but a part of me knew I needed to do something. My first instinct was to start the truck and get out of there, but the thought of drawing attention terrified me even more. Then I heard another sound, this time closer. Something tapped lightly against the side of the truck, on the opposite side of where I was looking. I whipped my head around, but there was nothing there. The chill that had been crawling up my spine now spread through my entire body, and my heart was pounding in my chest. I turned back to the car, and the figure was gone. I almost dropped the flashlight when I realized I couldn't see them anywhere. My first thought was to double-check the locks, even though I knew they were already secured. The feeling of being watched was almost suffocating, and I could barely breathe. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. I was on edge, every sense heightened, straining to hear any noise that might indicate where that person had gone. That's when the passenger side door handle jiggled violently, shaking the whole truck. I gripped the flashlight tightly and pointed it in that direction, but didn't turn it on right away. My body felt frozen with fear. Taking a deep breath, I summoned the courage to flick the switch. The flashlight beam cut through the glass, illuminating nothing. There was no one there, at least no one I could see. Just the emptiness of the night and the shadows cast by the flickering light. Before I could calm down, another sound jolted me. A scraping noise came from the back of the truck, like metal being dragged across the trailer. It was a horrible sound, like nails on a chalkboard, and it went on and on. I grabbed my phone and considered calling the police, but hesitated. How would I explain this? What would I say? Someone or something is messing with my truck in the middle of nowhere. While I debated, the sound stopped as suddenly as it had started. Silence returned, but it was heavy, almost oppressive, like the night itself was holding its breath. Then, as if to torment me further, the car's engine revved loudly. The roar of the engine shattered the silence, making me jump. I looked back at the car, which was now moving slowly, pulling out of its spot. I sat frozen, watching its dark silhouette as it turned and parked in the middle of the rest stop, directly facing my truck. It felt like it was watching me, analyzing me. I could feel something in the air, but I couldn't define what it was. My hands were slick with sweat, and my chest was rising and falling erratically. I sat there, staring, waiting for something to happen, while silently praying that nothing would. After what felt like an eternity, the car door opened slowly. This time, I saw it clearly. A figure stepped out, the same one from before. But now, under the flickering light of the street lamp, it looked even stranger. Tall, thin, and moving in a way that didn't seem natural, almost as if it didn't have full control of its body. The figure took a few steps toward my truck, then stopped, tilting its head like it was trying to see through the windshield. My entire body went cold. I didn't know whether to keep watching or make a noise to scare it off. All I knew was that something about this person, if it was a person, felt profoundly wrong. My mind was screaming for me to do something, anything, but my body refused to move. The figure stood there, head tilted, almost like it was deciding something. Then, with a sudden jerky motion, it started walking around the truck, slowly and silently. I could hear the faint crunch of footsteps on the dirt, getting closer to the cab. I gripped the flashlight so tightly my fingers ached. My eyes darted to the side mirror, trying to catch a glimpse of the shadow, but it seemed to vanish into the darkness and reappear without warning. That's when I heard the sound again. The passenger side door handle being yanked. Without thinking, I slammed my hand on the horn. The blaring sound echoed through the rest stop, cutting through the oppressive silence. For a moment, everything stopped. The footsteps, the rattling handle, all of it. The only sounds were the idling engine of the car and my own ragged breathing. I glanced toward the car again, expecting to see the figure, but it was gone. My heart nearly stopped when I realized the car was now in motion, slowly rolling toward the road. Its lights were still off, and the engine roared as it picked up speed. I sat there, frozen, watching it disappear into the night. But just as I thought it was over, a faint tap came from the back of the truck, almost like a goodbye. I stayed frozen, eyes glued to the rearview mirror, trying to make sense of that tap. It was impossible to see anything in the darkness beyond the faint, flickering light of the street lamp. My mind raced with possibilities, none of them comforting. Clutching the flashlight, I took a deep breath, and against every instinct telling me to stay put, stepped out of the truck. The air was icy, and the feeling of being watched was so intense it felt like a physical weight. I walked to the back of the truck, each step more hesitant than the last. When I finally reached the trailer, there was nothing. No marks, no sign that anyone or anything had touched it. I climbed back into the cab, still scanning my surroundings, and locked the doors again as tightly as I could. The car was gone, and the silence felt even heavier than before. I sat there for a while, hands gripping the wheel, trying to steady my breathing. Eventually, I started the engine and pulled out of the rest stop. As the sight disappeared in my rearview mirror, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had stayed behind, yet somehow still followed me. To this day, I don't know what happened that night. Maybe it was just a thief, but something deep inside me knows it was more than that. Something I never want to encounter again. I've never been the type to take unknown shortcuts, but that day felt especially chaotic. I was with 3 co-workers returning from a conference in another city, and we were all tired and impatient with the highway traffic. It was Jack's idea to cut through a neighborhood he claimed to know, a decision we should have never made. The place felt off the moment we entered. The streets were narrow, poorly lit, and most of the houses were completely dark, even though it wasn't that late, maybe around 8 p.m. After about 5 minutes of driving, the discomfort started to build. The street was so deserted that even the sound of the engine seemed too loud. Then we saw him, a man standing right in the middle of the road. He was facing away from us, wearing a dark jacket that looked a bit too big for him, and he wasn't moving. Right away, I thought he might be drunk or lost. Jack, who was driving, instinctively slowed down, maybe to avoid startling the guy. Everyone in the car went quiet, almost waiting to see what the man would do. Jack stopped the car about 10 feet away from the man. The tension inside the car was palpable. "Do you think he needs help?" Sarah asked quietly. Before anyone could respond, the man slowly turned to face us. It wasn't like in horror movies, where there's a dramatic twist. It was strange because he seemed empty. His face was mostly in shadow, dimly lit by the headlights, but you could make out a hard, almost emotionless expression. He started walking toward the car, and the sound of his boots on the pavement was the only thing we could hear. When he reached the driver's side, he began knocking on the window, hard. It wasn't a tap like someone asking for help. It was aggressive, impatient. Jack cracked the window slightly, maybe to ask what was wrong, but before he could say anything, the man hit the glass even harder, shouting something none of us could understand. Then the worst thing happened. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement near a parked car. Another man emerged from behind it and started trying to open the back door where Sarah was sitting. He was crouched, like he wanted to catch us off guard. Jack rolled the window up in a panic and yelled, "Hold on tight!" Before anyone could react, he slammed on the gas. The car jolted forward so hard I was almost thrown into the dashboard. The man at the window screamed something, but the engine's roar drowned it out. I turned around and saw the second guy running into the middle of the road like he was trying to chase us. For a split second, I thought he was going to jump onto the car, but he stopped. Even so, the image of him standing there, almost expressionless, is burned into my memory. When we turned the next corner, everyone started talking at once. Sarah was on the verge of tears, asking if anyone had called the police. Jack just kept repeating, "It was a setup. It was a setup." I was still trying to process everything when I noticed something that sent a chill down my spine. The car the second man had been hiding behind. It didn't look like it belonged there. The windows were tinted, and the doors were slightly ajar. It didn't seem like it was parked by someone who lived there. It was as if they had been waiting for us. Jack drove like his life depended on it, and honestly, it probably did. The silence in the car was suffocating. No one knew what to say. Everything felt unreal, like one of those bizarre videos you see online where you think, this would never happen to me. But it did. And the worst part was the feeling that we still weren't safe. The neighborhood was like a maze with identical streets, and the lighting got worse the farther we went. It felt like we couldn't find our way out. Then Sarah pointed at the rearview mirror, her voice shaky. "I think someone's following us." I turned around, and sure enough, there it was. A car with its headlights off, keeping a suspicious distance. I couldn't tell if it was the same car that had been parked earlier, but it didn't matter at that point. Jack sped up, and so did they. There was no honking, no shouting, nothing. They just kept following us, like they were waiting for the right moment. My heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. At that moment, I realized it wasn't just fear. It was the sense that they were in control, and we were playing right into their hands. Jack turned the next corner so fast the car almost lost traction. Sarah let out a muffled scream, and I grabbed onto the door handle, my breath shallow and uneven. But the worst part was that the car behind us was still there, and now their headlights were on, lighting up everything around us. That harsh light made everything feel even more terrifying, like we were on stage and they were watching us panic. "We need to find a main road, anything with traffic," Jack shouted. But it seemed like the streets just got more isolated the farther we went. Then we saw a small park ahead with a single street lamp flickering. It was the first time the scenery felt different, but not in a good way. Jack slammed on the brakes and we realized the car behind us had stopped too, but at a safe distance. It just sat there, as if taunting us. "What are they waiting for?" Mike asked quietly, his voice shaking like he didn't want to draw attention. Before anyone could answer, their car doors started opening. First the driver's side, then the passengers. I didn't wait to see more. I yelled at Jack to get us out of there. Jack didn't need another warning. The second those men stepped out, he floored the gas again, the engine roaring as we sped past the park. I kept looking behind us, half expecting them to run after us on foot, but they didn't. Still, it felt like we were being hunted. The neighborhood was like a trap, with no clear way out. Every corner felt like it could lead us right back into their hands. "There has to be a way out," Mike muttered, but no one answered. The headlights behind us were getting closer, and then suddenly they went out again. The darkness swallowed them. Jack kept driving, but his hands were shaking on the wheel. I could hear his heavy breathing, even in the silence. No one dared to speak. It was like we thought any noise would give us away. Then, up ahead, we saw something that gave us hope, an intersection leading to what looked like a bigger road. "There, over there," I yelled, pointing desperately. As we got closer, we finally saw streetlights and the faint glow of headlights in the distance. For a moment, it felt like we were safe. But then their car reappeared, faster this time, swerving toward us. Jack swerved to avoid them, nearly driving up onto the sidewalk. Their car sped past us, but instead of chasing us further, they stopped. Right in the middle of the road. It was bizarre. They didn't try to follow us again, didn't do anything threatening. They just turned off their engine and sat there. No movement, no sound. It was like the game was over, and they'd already won. No one in the car knew how to react. We just drove past them in stunned silence, our hearts still pounding from the adrenaline. When we finally reached a busy road, it felt surreal. Seeing other cars, other people. It was like stepping back into reality after a nightmare. We pulled into a gas station to catch our breath, but no one wanted to leave the car for long. It felt like the danger was still out there, waiting for us. I looked at my hands and realized they were still trembling. For the first time in a long while, I felt completely helpless, like nothing we could have done would have changed what happened that night. At the gas station, we decided to call the police. Jack was hesitant, saying they probably wouldn't be able to do much, but Sarah insisted. When we explained everything, it was clear the dispatcher didn't think much of it. They said they'd send a patrol car to check the area, but we didn't even have a license plate to give them, let alone a good description of the men. It was frustrating, but there wasn't much else we could do. The whole thing still felt so unreal that even while explaining it, I wondered if they thought we were overreacting. On the drive home, the silence returned, but this time it wasn't just fear. It was something heavier, like we'd brushed up against something we'd never fully understand. I still wonder what would have happened if we had hesitated just a little longer, if we hadn't found that intersection in time. It all happened so fast, but it left a mark on all of us. To this day, I can't drive through suburban neighborhoods without feeling a chill run down my spine. Maybe it was just an attempted robbery, but deep down, part of me believes it was something far stranger and far darker. Driving late at night always had its risks, but I enjoyed the quiet streets and the stillness that came with them. It had become my routine to pick up passengers between midnight and 4 a.m., when the streets were calm, but the odd and unsettling stories seemed to multiply. That night, I'd been driving for about 2 hours, and I just needed one more ride to call it a shift. The notification popped up. A passenger nearby, no profile picture, and the destination wasn't far. I didn't think much and accepted it. When I pulled up to the pickup spot, he was already standing there under the dim glow of a streetlight. He didn't look at me right away, just climbed into the car quietly, barely murmuring a "good evening." Something about him made me uneasy, but I couldn't pinpoint why. As soon as we started driving, I noticed how restless he was. He couldn't sit still, constantly fidgeting with his jacket like he was hiding something underneath it. At first, I thought he might just be cold or anxious. Maybe he'd had an argument or was running from some personal drama. But then he started asking, in a low, urgent tone, how much longer it would take to get to his destination. I glanced at the GPS and told him it'd be about 15 minutes. He stayed quiet for a moment, then repeated the question like he hadn't heard me, or maybe like he was racing against some unseen clock. The atmosphere in the car grew tense. I turned on the radio softly, hoping to break the awkward silence, but he immediately asked me to turn it off, almost whispering, like the sound was too much for him. I tried to focus on the road, but it was impossible to ignore how strange he was acting. At every intersection, he glanced out the window like he was searching for something, or someone. My mind began racing. Was he running from someone? Or worse, planning to do something to me? That's when I noticed he was holding something under his jacket, pressing it tightly against his body. I couldn't see exactly what it was, but it looked long and wrapped in some sort of cloth. The tension in the car became suffocating, and I felt cold sweat trickle down the back of my neck. I thought about asking him what he was carrying, but decided against it. What if it was a weapon, or worse? I figured my best option was to get to the destination quickly and end this ride. When we were just a few blocks away from his stop, he asked me to pull over early, saying he wanted to get out there. It struck me as odd, but I didn't argue. I stopped the car, and for a moment, he just sat there, like he was waiting for something. Then, without warning, he opened the door and bolted into the opposite direction of where the GPS pointed. He vanished so quickly I barely had time to process what had happened. When I turned to check the back seat, trying to make sense of his sudden exit, I saw it. On the seat was an old, folded cloth, damp and stained. As my eyes adjusted to the dim light, I realized it was blood. My heart immediately started pounding. I didn't know what to do. Staring at the thing just made the situation worse. My first instinct was to clean it up and pretend nothing had happened. But then the real fear set in. What if this guy had done something terrible? What if, without meaning to, I'd become involved in something horrible? I took a deep breath and carefully grabbed the cloth, trying not to touch it directly. The metallic smell was unmistakable, and just holding it made my head spin. A million scenarios raced through my mind, a fight, a crime, something deeply wrong. But the more I tried to piece it together, the less sense it made. I decided to step out of the car to calm myself and figure out what to do next. The street was deserted, with flickering streetlights making everything feel even more unsettling. That's when I noticed he hadn't simply run off. Further ahead, under the shadow of a tree, I could make out a silhouette, perfectly still. My heart nearly stopped. It was him, standing there, watching me. He didn't move or say anything. He was just there, like he was waiting to see what I'd do. Panic took over, and without thinking, I jumped back into the car and locked the doors. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. I just kept thinking about getting out of there as fast as possible. When I sped off, I couldn't stop glancing at the rearview mirror. He was still standing there, motionless, like he was rooted to the spot. I tried to convince myself it was just paranoia, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. As I drove, his figure disappeared into the darkness, but the tension didn't leave me. I grabbed the blood-stained cloth and threw it onto the passenger side floor, trying to block out the smell and the questions it raised. At every red light, I found myself scanning the area, half expecting him to appear out of nowhere. My mind was a chaotic mess, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Who was this guy? What was he carrying? And worst of all, why did he leave that behind? When I finally got home, I sat in the car for several minutes, too shaken to go inside. The thought of carrying a piece of evidence, of God knows what, terrified me. But what if I called the police? What would I even say? They'd ask questions, want details I didn't have. What if they thought I was involved? I decided to wrap the cloth in a plastic bag and throw it away far from my house. But when I picked it up again, I noticed something strange. It felt heavier than before, like there was something inside. My stomach turned. With trembling hands, I unwrapped the cloth, and what I saw nearly made me pass out. It wasn't just blood. Inside the cloth was a ring, still fresh with blood, and what looked like a lock of hair. I didn't know what to do at that point. My body froze, and my mind scrambled for any logical explanation, but nothing made sense. Why would he leave something like that in the car? Was it a message, a warning, or just carelessness? Suddenly, paranoia hit me like a wave. I wrapped the cloth back up and shoved it into the plastic bag as quickly as I could. Just touching it made me feel like I was crossing some invisible line. That's when I started hearing noises. Faint sounds, like footsteps or the rustling of leaves. I looked around but didn't see anyone. Still, the feeling of being watched was unbearable. I drove to an empty lot far from my house, desperate to rid myself of the bag. When I got there, I grabbed it and walked to the nearest dumpster, my heart racing. As I approached, I felt it again, that heavy, suffocating presence. I didn't hear footsteps this time, but it was as if someone was right behind me. My heart was pounding so loudly I thought it might burst. I didn't dare look back. I just tossed the bag into the dumpster and ran back to my car. As I slammed the door shut and locked it, I glanced in the rearview mirror, and there he was, the man, standing just a few feet from the dumpster, staring directly at me. The sight of him so close made me freeze. It was like I was trapped in my own nightmare. He didn't move, not for a second. He just stood there, watching, as if he was waiting for something. My first instinct was to floor the gas pedal, but my body wouldn't cooperate. My hands clung to the wheel, and the sound of my heartbeat drowned out all rational thought. It wasn't until he took a single step toward me that I snapped out of it. I stomped on the gas and sped out of there, not daring to look back. I just wanted to put as much distance between us as possible. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I turned off the engine and sat there, breathing heavily, trying to calm my nerves. The bag was in the dumpster. He couldn't follow me. Right? That's what I kept telling myself, but deep down, I knew this wasn't over. I went inside, locked every door, and went straight to the shower, hoping to wash off the fear. But as the water poured over me, I felt it again. That strange, oppressive feeling that I wasn't alone. I stepped out of the bathroom, still clutching a towel, and peeked through the window. That's when I saw him. Across the street, standing in the shadows, he was there again, motionless. He knew where I lived. Even now, I can't get his image out of my head. Those eyes, staring at me from the darkness, haunt me every time I close mine. I don't know who he was or what he wanted, but I can't shake the feeling that somehow he's still watching. It was around 1 a.m. when I finally left my friend Sarah's house after a long night of chatting about things I can't even remember now. I took the usual shortcut home, a rural road that's quiet, but always feels a bit eerie at night. It wasn't my first time driving there late, so I wasn't exactly scared, but the isolation always gave me a weird feeling. The silence was absolute, broken only by the sound of the tires on the pavement and the occasional chirping of crickets or rustling of animals in the bushes. The only light came from my headlights, cutting through the narrow road ahead. Everything seemed normal until I noticed a figure on the side of the road. At first, I thought it was a shadow, or maybe my eyes playing tricks on me. You know when your mind starts imagining things because you're alone? But as I got closer, I realized it was someone. A person was walking along the shoulder, waving their hands like they were asking for help. My heart started racing. There weren't any houses nearby, nothing to explain why someone would be out there in the middle of nowhere at this hour. Instinctively, I slowed down, but not much, just enough to get a better look at what was going on. I kept my doors locked, of course. The figure looked like a man, but it was hard to tell. He was wearing a dark hoodie with the hood covering most of his face. I don't know why, but everything about him screamed at me not to stop. As I drove past him, I tried to get a better look, but he seemed to avoid the direct beam of the headlights, like he knew exactly how to stay partially hidden. My stomach churned, but I felt conflicted. What if he really needed help? At the same time, my gut told me to keep going. Then something happened that made me freeze. On the opposite side of the road, almost parallel to where the man stood, another figure stepped out from the trees, right at the edge of the shoulder. It happened so fast that my brain struggled to process it. This second figure was smaller, maybe a woman or even a teenager, but what terrified me was how they appeared, like they had been waiting in the darkness all along. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. It didn't feel like a coincidence, you know? They seemed coordinated, like they knew I'd be passing by. I didn't think twice. I slammed on the gas and sped away as fast as I could, the roar of my engine echoing through the empty road. As I glanced in the rearview mirror, I saw them standing there, one on each side of the road, just watching me disappear into the darkness. Even after speeding off, I couldn't shake the scene from my mind. My hands were sweaty on the wheel, gripping so hard my fingers started to tingle. Why were they there? Was it a coincidence? Or had I just escaped something terrible? The worst part was the thought that maybe someone genuinely needed help. What if that man was lost, or had been in an accident? But then I'd remember the second figure stepping out of the woods, and my stomach would churn all over again. Nothing about it felt right. The road was completely empty, no other cars in sight. It was like I was the only person in the world at that moment. Every turn, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, expecting to see lights or something following me. But there was nothing, just the pitch-black night behind me. My mind was racing. I tried convincing myself it was paranoia, that I was blowing things out of proportion, but there was something about that situation that simply didn't make sense. And the way they stood there, motionless, watching, it gave me chills just thinking about it. When I finally reached a more populated stretch of road with a few houses and streetlights, I felt some relief, but not entirely. I pulled into a gas station that was still open and parked, sitting there for a while to calm down before continuing home. After a few minutes at the gas station, I still felt uneasy. The fear had passed, but the doubt lingered. Should I have called the police? Reported what I saw? But what would I even say? I saw two people on the road, and one came out of the woods. It didn't sound alarming when said out loud, but for someone who was there, it was a completely different thing. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they were just two people lost, or someone needing help and a friend or relative nearby. But why would someone hide in the woods, and why didn't they ask for help together? None of it added up. Eventually, I decided to keep driving home. I was closer now and felt like the worst part was behind me. But that uncomfortable feeling of being watched stuck with me. I wasn't just checking the rearview mirror anymore. Now I was scanning both sides of the road, half expecting to see something emerge from the trees. That's when I saw something that nearly made me lose control of the car. Standing at the side of the road, farther ahead, was the same man who had waved earlier. It was him. I was sure of it. The dark hoodie, the same posture, everything. But it didn't make sense. I had driven for miles since I first saw him. How could he possibly have gotten there so fast? My body froze. For a second, I thought about braking, but my instinct made me hit the gas even harder. I passed him quickly, barely looking, but I saw enough to confirm it was the same person. This time, he wasn't waving. He was just standing there facing away from the road, but slowly turning his head as if he was watching me pass. What the hell was going on? I started to feel surrounded, like this wasn't just a coincidence. My heart was pounding and my hands were shaking on the wheel. Suddenly, that road I knew so well felt completely unfamiliar, like something was wrong with the place itself. I drove the rest of the way home without blinking, hyper-focused on every shadow, every tree, every possible movement. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I felt such a wave of relief that I thought I might collapse right there. I parked in the garage and sat there for a moment, trying to collect myself. But as I turned off the engine, an inexplicable wave of dread hit me. I glanced in the rearview mirror, purely out of reflex, and my heart nearly stopped. There, standing on the sidewalk across the street, was someone wearing a dark hoodie. I couldn't see their face, but it was enough to send me running inside without looking back. I rushed into the house, nearly tripping on the steps as I unlocked the door. As soon as I was inside, I locked everything: the front door, the deadbolts, even the windows. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. Maybe it was paranoia. Maybe I was imagining things, connecting dots that weren't really there. But the feeling that something wasn't right was impossible to ignore. I grabbed my phone and thought about calling the police. But what was I going to say? That someone was following me with no real evidence to back it up? I sat in the living room trying to breathe and calm down, but every little sound made me jump. The wind outside, the creaking of the house. Everything seemed louder, more sinister. I stayed frozen for a long time, staring at the front door, waiting to hear a knock or see a shadow pass by the glass. But nothing happened. When I finally worked up the nerve to look out the bedroom window, what I saw made my blood run cold. The street was empty, but at the very end, just barely lit by the glow of a streetlight, was the same figure from before, standing there, motionless, watching me from a distance. I didn't know what to do. I felt completely exposed. I yanked the curtain shut and backed away from the window, my heart pounding in my chest. I decided I wasn't just going to sit there and wait for something to happen. I grabbed a kitchen knife and went straight to my bedroom, locking the door behind me. I don't even know why I picked that room as a hiding spot, but it felt like the only place where I had any sense of safety. I turned on the light and sat on the bed, clutching my phone in one hand and the knife in the other, trying to keep myself together. I called my friend again, but the call dropped before she could answer, and I couldn't bring myself to try again. I didn't even know how to explain what was going on. Minutes felt like hours. I kept glancing at the window and checking my phone, hoping I wouldn't see a motion alert from my security cameras. But at the same time, I had this overwhelming feeling that I was being watched. It was suffocating, like the weight of that presence was pressing down on me, even though I couldn't see it. Finally, I worked up the courage to open the security app on my phone. When the live feed loaded, I nearly dropped the phone. The figure was there, standing on the sidewalk directly in front of my house. He hadn't moved, hadn't made a sound, but now he was closer than ever. My hands were shaking so much that I almost dropped the phone. None of it made sense. I hadn't heard footsteps, no sound of the gate being opened, nothing. I stared at the camera feed, trying to convince myself it wasn't real, that my mind was playing tricks on me. But no matter how much the phone trembled in my hand, that figure stayed right there, completely still. The most chilling part was how he was positioned, leaning slightly forward, almost like he was studying the camera. I felt a chill run down my spine and immediately closed the app. I couldn't look anymore. The silence in the house was overwhelming. I stayed there in the bedroom, trying to figure out what to do, but every option felt wrong. Leaving was out of the question, but staying made me feel like a sitting duck. I took a deep breath and decided to call the police, even if I didn't know how to explain what was happening. While I waited on hold, with the operator's automated voice droning in my ear, something made me glance toward the bedroom window. It was instinctive, like I just knew something was wrong. When I pulled the curtain back just a little, my blood froze. He was in the yard, near the fence, staring directly at my window. I dropped the phone immediately, the sound of the call still buzzing faintly in the background. I could barely breathe. How did he get there? I hadn't heard anything, no footsteps, no noise from the fence being moved. I stood frozen, staring through the gap in the curtain, until I noticed something even more disturbing. He wasn't exactly looking at me, but it felt like he knew I was there, like he could sense me. Then, almost imperceptibly, he tilted his head to the side, as if he were analyzing my reaction. My heart felt like it was about to explode. I bolted into the bathroom attached to my room, locking the door behind me. I turned on the shower to drown out the oppressive silence, but even the sound of running water seemed unnervingly loud. Each drop echoed like a ticking clock, marking the seconds until something would happen. I stayed there for what felt like an eternity, until everything went completely still. The wind, the water, even the house's creaks, it all stopped. Gripping my phone, I tried to open the security app again, but the cameras were offline. That was when I realized I couldn't hear anything outside anymore. Summoning all the courage I had left, I stepped out of the bathroom and looked through the bedroom window one last time. He was gone. No trace of him anywhere.